What's up, chess player? Today I'm gonna be roasting the Sicilian defense, one of my favorite openings, a very dynamic one. A very strong subscriber of mine has played this game around 2100 if I remember correctly, because that was a classical game, not an online game. So that's gonna be incredibly instructive for you. Let's get started. So my subscriber Mehmet starts as a nickname, and unfortunately I can't pronounce it, the whole part, so hopefully that's okay for you. And yeah, the game started with this d6 variation, one of the main lines here, and yeah, of course that invites all of those d4 complications here, the main move. But white played c3, of course, very playable moves, so many players are doing that. Let's see what's gonna happen here. So it's very important, first of all, not to blunder your knight, because after knight takes e4, there is suddenly queen takes queen to a4 check, and you're losing your knight. That is exactly what happened to me in a classical game when I was, well, not really a child. I was a pretty strong chess player back at the time, but I still blundered the knight like that. Can you imagine that? I mean, that was a devastating game for me. g6 has been played. Fortunately, my subscriber is not that stupid as I was back at the time. Castles, bishop to g7, still the pawn on e4 is untouchable. Rook to e1 has been played, castles. Finally, that is the first moment when you might say that the pawn is really hanging. So white is playing bishop f1 and the rook now protects it. And actually white has a very good perspective here to play d4 and have a perfect center. So black needs to really do something against it, really try to fight against this very, very strong center. Takes, and bishop g4 was a way for black, to fight against it. So the knight is pinned here and the pawn is under attack if you take with a queen back. If you play bishop e4, that's also not great because the second pawn is hanging. So what white did is e5 here, but the drawback is that the bishop on g7 might become a very, very strong one. Still, I like white's position a little bit more thanks to this pawn center, but what's good for black, there are always some dynamic chances in the Sicilian defense, and that is exactly what black here has. Let's see, bishop e2 seems like a very logical move to deal with this pin, to be ready for all sorts of exchanges. That is exactly what happened. But the game is pretty simple for black now. You don't have any problematic pieces. You have exchanged your light squares bishop. This one is just a monster. All you need to do is remaneuver your knight. Let's see how black did it. Rook c8, I really like this move. Knight d7, another great move. So far so good. The knight is going to e5. I'm not really sure it's gonna be there so great because of the potential f4 ideas, but obviously you have knight to c4, and yeah, the knight is gonna be pretty strong there. b3 is almost never a good idea because of this bishop on g7, and you could see that the engine suggests here bishop takes c3, and I understand it's an incredible difficult move to make. I mean, probably I wouldn't make it either, because like exchanging your best piece, how horrible that might feel. But computer just doesn't care about that. It says, well, now the pawn on c3 is gonna be so strong here. The knight, yeah, potentially going to e5 to c5, and yeah, there are just weaknesses for whites to handle. But still, giving up your bishop is a very, very difficult thing to do. Bishop to h6 has been played. White decided to exchange this bishop, but I still really like this position for black. Rook to c7. I don't really see any reason not to go even more forward to c4. Maybe you still wanted to preserve this square for the knight, but here the pawn is pinned and the rook is going to be so strong on c4. So rook c7 has been played instead, doubling the rooks here, and queen a6 has been played. Well, yeah, probably attacking the knight on c3, threatening to take here on e2, so I could understand that, although feels a little bit like the queen is offside the game here. Rook to c2 has been played, and now knight c4. Yeah, so knight b2. What I like is with every move you are creating some threats, and that is a very, very good strategy here. Queen to d3 has been played, and you took it on b2. Yeah, seems like white can't really punish you for that. The drawback is, of course, that you're gonna have those double pawns, which gonna make a task of converting this extra pawn much more difficult, but well, still an extra pawn. Your king is ready to get there, and definitely black is in the driver's seat here. But let's take a look at this endgame, rook's endgame. It's going to be very, very instructive for all of you guys watching. King to f6, f3, h5. You could see that there are so many problems with the dark squares for white. But if you play f4, trying not to allow the king to go forward, then you're going to weaken both of the e4 and f4 pawns, and you need to deal with it afterwards. h4 has been played, rook to c2. Yeah, I guess it's okay to exchange one pair of rooks, so it's simpler for you to penetrate with the rook and the king. Rook to c5, another kind of passive move. I mean, whenever you have a chance to go forwards, to be as active as possible, you should use it. Remember what the first World Chess Champion Wilhelm Steinitz said: if you have a positional advantage, if you have the initiative, you must use it. Otherwise, it's gonna disappear. The rook on c5 doesn't really create any threats. I mean, I don't even see why it's better here than it was on c8. Maybe the only thing is it protects the a5 pawn. But you shouldn't be protecting, you should attack your opponent here. Yeah, now you're finally making this move, but you're kind of wasted the tempo. a4, a3, rook to e2. Yeah, for white it's so dangerous to go here, allowing the rook to penetrate to the second rank. There are so many weaknesses, and this a pawn is going to be very strong. But the alternative, rook e2, means that now the rook is going to be very, very passive, and finally it's time for this king to penetrate. For some reason you don't want to do that. I don't really know why, because you always want to use your your king in the endgame. I mean, you have so many penetration squares. You should go through. You should try to use all of your pieces. And the king in the endgame is as active piece as everybody else, if not more active. They say the king is worth a rook in the endgame because, well, it can go diagonally and vertically or horizontally. So yeah, you really should use it as an attacking piece. King to d2, rook to b1, king to c3. Yeah, I don't really like what you're doing here, because you're allowing your opponent's king to be very, very active, and you're giving him the time to activate his king. I mean, that is the opposite of what I would like to do. But finally, king is going to e5, and now e6. Yeah, that is allowing here f4, and you need to go back once again. And that is a huge difference. If you're doing it here, then you want to go to f4, but you also want to go to d4. For example, here you can go to d4. Your king is perfect in the center of the board. So time is always the most important thing in chess. You shouldn't waste your time. If you have a penetration opportunity for your king, you should do it. You shouldn't bring your opponent's king to the center, because obviously on c3 it's much more active than it was on e1. So all you have achieved is improved your opponent's king, which enables your opponent to play f4 here. And then even e5, and you could see that white is very active, but of course taking here on e6, making it once again simpler for you. So instead you can start with this pawn, and then at least this e6 pawn is going to be a weakness. But what happened is what happened. And now you played rook b2. Yeah, rook f1 is a very weird move. Like, your rook is very active here. Why would you voluntarily go to f2 and make it passive there? Rook b2, just, yeah, given a choice, asking a question. Do you want to exchange the rooks? But that it would be pawns endgames with an extra pawn for black. Definitely completely winning, no question about that. Or you want to escape out of the second rank, but then you're going to lose a pawn. Both options are not that great. This one is probably a little bit better because, yeah, black can still try to win the game, but with the rooks on the board, it's always more difficult than in the pawn endgames. So rook b6 has been played now. The king is cut on the A rank, and that is, of course, a huge, huge advantage for black. You can't really go anywhere. But now you're playing rook takes d6. I guess the reason is if king takes, you're afraid of rook to e3, and now your king is cut, or maybe even f5 move. That might be true, might be true. And now with the rook takes, you have this chance to penetrate over here. Yeah, king g4, that feels very, very strong. rook d3, and now you're just taking all of the pawns there and you're completely winning. That is why white resigned here. So I hope this game was instructive for you. I hope the endgame especially you have learned a lot of how you need to use a combination of all of your pieces. Don't forget about the king. You could see that in the endgame, who is having more active king is basically winning the rook's endgame. So hit the like button if you enjoyed this game, and in this one I show you more of my subscriber games, and you can learn out of their mistakes and not repeat it in your games. That's incredibly a useful thing to do, and you can grow as a chess player much faster if you do that.